Skip Bayless here. I want to tell you about my podcast, The Skip Bayless Show. On this show, my show, I go deeper than I ever have, taking you behind the scenes of some of the biggest moments in sports, behind the headlines, even peeling back the curtain on my own personal life. I like to call it the undisputed. Instead of debating my partner Shannon Sharp, I'll tell you stories you've never heard before and let you in on what makes me, me. Make sure you listen to The Skip Bayless Show on your favorite podcast app.
As if the McCrispy couldn't get any better, Bacon and Ranch just entered the chat. The Bacon Ranch McCrispy, available at participating McDonald's for a limited time. Ba-da-ba-ba-ba.
The Purple Mafia, with your host, Paladino Joey.
Well, we'll see. The doctors would disagree, but what do they know?
So let's just say that you'll pay me because it's in your interest to pay me.
Is it worth it? I mean, you've won. You want to wipe everybody out?
I don't feel I have to wipe everybody out, Tom. Just my enemy. That's all. My father taught me many things. He taught me, keep your friends close, but your enemies closer.
These are wonderful things that we've achieved, and there's no limit to where we can go from here.
Welcome to the family here on Purple Mafia, episode number 30. Yes, finally, episode number 30 of Purple Mafia. Today is Tuesday, May the 5th, Cinco de Mayo, 2009. At least the last 4 minutes of it, actually, now as I look at the time, as I'm getting this show in after a late night at work. It is a pleasure to finally be back here on Purple Mafia, the big show of Paladino Live Productions. Of course, my 3 shows, you'll hear about them later in the ads that will be played on the show today. Man, it's been a long time, folks. It's been over a month, about 5 weeks, and of course that is because of the lawn cleanup season. Again, I am very, very sorry that things had to go in that direction, but hey, I gotta make money. That's the only way to survive, is do 2 jobs in this day and age. And that's the way life goes. Of course, there has been a lot of stuff to talk about. Of course, all that free time, more free time anyway, when I only had 1 job. Nothing was going on. No free agent news. The biggest free agent signing basically was Glenn Holt or Carl Pema from the Denver Broncos. I mean, okay. Glenn Holt, by the way, yeah, as I said, I think he'll make a nice kickoff returner for the Minnesota Vikings, as his numbers were pretty darn good with Cincinnati in that area. But sorry, it's just, I'm sorry it's been so long, but now you know why. You probably knew why, as a lot of you out there have an idea that I do a lawn service with my brother, and that can obviously set things back in the months of April and November because of the cleanups. Mowing is not a problem. All right, enough of my life, enough of my rambling. You want to hear about the Minnesota Vikings, as do I. Well, on today's show, episode number 30, a nice little milestone, by the way. And we're going to talk about the draft, the NFL draft, Percy Harvin, Lode Holt, and Asher Allen. I'm pretty excited about this Asher Allen guy. I actually like what I see about him. Yeah, it's going to be very interesting to see how he turns out with the Minnesota Vikings. There's some highlights involving him with Percy Harvin, by the way. So I really wish I could have done a show about the draft before before the draft. Percy Harvin late was a guy that I was targeting for this team, so it went my way basically. I'm sure it went a lot of your way out there. A lot of people were cheering when Percy Harvin was selected. A lot of people were cheering when PA Paul Allen asked the crowd who the Vikings fans would prefer to be taken at that spot. And yeah, the place went pretty loud for Percy Harvin. All right, well, before we go to break, Purple Mafia is available on the sportstuff.com and iTunes. I thank each and every one of you always for downloading and listening to this show. Even though there was a long time in between the previous two shows, things will be a bit easier now, of course, as news breaks. Things will be able to get these shows up much more promptly, and there's going to be a lot of stuff to talk about, as, of course, in segment number 2, the draft talk today. Segment number 3, Brett Favre. Yes, Brett Favre, the story has revived with Brett Favre joining your Purple. It is going to be very interesting indeed to see how this turns out. The likelihood of this thing, well, it's more likely in terms of the ball is in Brett's court right now. He's not under contract with the Green Bay Packers or the New York Jets. He is available. The New York Jets granted him his release. He can do whatever he wants at this point in time as long as the other team wants him. And you're going to find out that the Vikings just very well do want him if he is healthy with the bicep and shoulder issue in his throwing arm. That's kind of a problem, but we'll see how that goes depending on that. All right, well, with no further ado, we're going to take us a quick break, and we will get into the draft talk right after this. Here on the sportstuff.com, we're bursting in blue with Timberwolves Explosion. Timberwolves fans, your show has arrived at last as we bring in a new era with Al Jefferson, Kevin Love, and Mike Miller. We're available on the sportstuff.com and also available on iTunes. Download and listen to in-depth and detailed coverage of your favorite team. Show your true blue and join this explosion of Timberwolves basketball. And we are back here on Purple Mafia, episode number 30, a reminder for iPod users. This, of course, is the episode where we will discuss the draft and the returning possibility of Brett Favre joining the Minnesota Vikings. Do check out Timberwolves Explosion. There will be a major season wrap-up and, of course, talk about the new GM that has not been hired. Well, not GM, the new Vice President of Basketball Operations and possible new coach that will be joining the Timberwolves at some point in time. We will discuss that, the possibilities, where the Wolves should go. I would like to have Marcus, the forecaster, join me for that show. It will be a biggie, regardless if he joins or not, but I would love it if he did. It would make it funner, or more fun, for all of you out there. Excuse my bad grammar. It would make it more fun for all of you out there to have two people, I think. And, yeah, that show will be a blast. Do check it out. Those of you out there that care about the National Basketball Association. Of course, I'll be keeping up with the NBA playoffs as well. All right, now we got all that taken care of. Well, the NFL draft was very interesting this year, once again. There were a lot of trades, lots of trade downs, and the Patriots must have traded down about 10 times. The Cleveland Cavaliers, a little too much basketball on my head here. The Cleveland Browns traded down about 4 times. It was incredible. They amassed lots and lots of draft picks. The top 5, well, there's no surprise with the first 2 picks anyway. Matthew Stafford going to Detroit. They need a new quarterback, but a lot of people argue that they need a tackle first and worry about the quarterback the next year. Because the game is won in the trenches, as a lot of us know that. But nope, Matthew Stafford is the quarterback of the Detroit Lions, and he is going to be facing a little bit of trouble as NFL East to West hosts Dylan Richardson, our guy, the executive producer on the sportstuff.com, and Jim Towers talked about that Matthew Stafford is going to be in for a rude awakening in the NFL when defensive linemen are going to come flying at him because the O-line in Detroit sucks. Well, the St. Louis Rams improved by getting Jason Smith, the tackle, the best tackle in the draft. There were a lot of good ones, by the way. Thankfully, the Vikings got one in the second round, not the first round. We'll get to that in a sec. But yeah, St. Louis getting better there. Kansas City pulling off a little surprise, getting Tyson Jackson instead of Aaron Curry. The defensive end Tyson Jackson still can end up being a big-time player for the Kansas City Chiefs, but Farzine, not a happy camper that the Chiefs passed on Aaron Curry, who then went to Seattle immediately. I mean, all of us thought he was going to go to the Chiefs. Farzine, not a happy camper. Of course, Farzine, who hosts the Chiefs Zone on the sportstuff.com and iTunes, always worth a listen. That guy is a star in the making. All right. New York Jets trade up and acquire Mark Sanchez. Quarterback Mark Sanchez, the second quarterback to go, of course, and a lot of people think he has a chance to be pretty good. And, of course, this meant Brett Favre would suddenly be expendable. A lot of us didn't think Brett Favre was going to return to the New York Jets anyway, but now he absolutely is expendable. And quarterback Mark Sanchez is the future, and Brett Favre is the past. And now, well, we'll see what happens with that. The biggest surprise of the draft, of course, Oakland selecting Darius Hayward-Bay. I mean, I was shaking my head when I was out there listening to it, doing a nasty lawn cleanup with sticks everywhere. Yeah, I was listening to that, shaking my head and grinning. What idiots the Oakland Raiders are. They really are. Al Davis, I mean, I wish you could fire owners in the NFL, but it'll never happen. And eventually the Oakland Raiders will hopefully have a new owner, as I feel for you out there, out in Raider Nation. Darius Hayward-Bay, who knows? I mean, some people believe that he is going to be a very good football player. You never know. The Vikings made a similar move with a 7th overall pick years ago, taking Troy Williamson, who was just pitiful, is barely hanging on with the Jacksonville Jaguars. The Vikings, of course, acquired a 7th round pick for their 7th overall pick in Troy Williamson. So sometimes picking a guy just based on speed is not the right thing to do, especially when 40-year-old Brad Johnson was overthrowing Troy Williamson. 40-year-old Brad Johnson was overthrowing Troy Williamson. I guess speed wasn't really a strength either. But I digress. Green Bay Packers, here's obviously a major notable, B.J. Raji. That could be a really big-time pick for the Green Bay Packers. Of course, you never know how people are going to turn out. As Glenn Dorsey, all of us thought he was going to be a big-time stud for the Kansas City Chiefs. Not so much. Not yet. And just like Bryant McKinney with the Vikings, was he worthy of a 7th overall pick? No. I'm sorry, guys. There's a guy who should have gone 22nd, 23rd, 24th in the draft, not 7th. Bryant McKinney has definitely underachieved in his career thus far. Michael Crabtree, the second wide receiver taken, despite the fact he was ranked number 1 with a bullet, other than number 2 guy, Percy Harvin. Percy Harvin and Macklin, Jeremy Macklin, very close in that category, but Michael Crabtree going to the San Francisco 49ers in hopes to become the next Jerry Rice. The only problem is Joe Montana is not really there anymore. You're looking at Sean Hill as your starting quarterback in San Francisco. Yeah, Michael Crabtree is going to be in for a rude awakening with that as well, unfortunately for him. Larry English was kind of a strange draft pick for the San Diego Chargers. But, hey, he could very well work out. We know how Kevin Williams was kind of a strange pick at the time for the Vikings, and he turned out to be much better than the guy we wanted in Terrell Suggs. That was just a fantastic move by the Vikings, which is kind of hard to say, as the Vikings have had some struggles in the draft over the years at the top. But I would say Rick Spielman did a very good job, has done a very good job since he's become the Minnesota Vikings boss of football operations. And, yeah, I'm happy with Rick Spielman thus far. All right, another notable, Josh Freeman, a guy the Viking fans were hoping could be our savior here in Minnesota because of Sage Rosenfels being the great unknown, and a guy who throws a lot of interceptions, to be honest with you, in very little time. And, of course, Tavares Jackson, who all of us have just gotten sick of over the years. I mean, Tavares Jackson is an enigma at best at the quarterback position. I don't know what to think of him. So Josh Freeman, a guy that people were hoping just maybe somehow would accidentally slip to the Vikings, and maybe we'd pull the trigger on that. Nope, he's going to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and he has a chance to be pretty good. But yeah, we'll see what happens with that. Josh Freeman, not a Viking. Jeremy Maclin, of course, the other guy the Viking fans and the Vikings themselves could have been targeting at wide receiver. I mean, his numbers in college were absolutely fantastic. And now the Philadelphia Eagles will finally get a legitimate receiver in Jeremy Maclin of Missouri. I mean, his numbers just phenomenal. 102 catches, 1,260 yards, 13 touchdowns in his sophomore year. Just his sophomore year. Amazing. 2007 as a freshman, 1,055 yards, 80 catches, 9 touchdowns as a freshman. Now, of course, a red shirt freshman, but hey, it doesn't matter. This guy has a chance to be really good. Me and Marcus, the forecaster, were talking about him a little bit that, yeah, he wouldn't have been a bad idea either, but he's gone. And that now brings us to the Minnesota Vikings. Well, super quick, Alex Mack was a guy that some people were hinting maybe it wouldn't be the worst idea ever, the center, who Cleveland ended up with after trading down about 55 times and acquiring extra draft picks. So now Cleveland will have a legitimate center, and good for them. And now the guy we all wanted and kind of quietly expected. Percy Harvin was available, but of course there was talk because, whoa, the third best tackle in this draft has slipped all the way down to 22 in Michael Orr, which is just, oh my God. And Paul Charchian of KFAN fame and of Fanball fame and all that good stuff, NFLSafe.com, or FantasyFootballSafe.com, excuse me, of Ole Miss, Michael Orr of Ole Miss, absolutely would have been a good pick, and Paul Charchian was all over it. He's saying the Vikings need to take this guy. I know it's not going to excite the fans or sell tickets, but this guy is a foundation for this team, and a team that absolutely needs help at the right tackle position, because Ryan Cook is just not a very good foot, is not that good at all, really, to be honest. You'll hear me say Ryan Cook sucks in one of my old videos from 2007 on YouTube, but Paladino Live, of course, on YouTube. You can always look that up whenever. But it's up to Michael Orr or Percy Harvin. I was kind of like, At that point, I was kind of 50-50 a little bit. I mean, that wouldn't have been the worst idea to take Michael Orr, if quite honestly. But the Vikings need to get this offense moving forward immediately, and Percy Harvin was the selection. Of course, Brad Childress traveled to Atlanta on Wednesday, and it was so out there. I mean, it was so obvious that he had gone there. I mean, the reports were all over the place, and it was like, okay, yeah, they're just dotting the I's and crossing the T's here, making absolutely sure this guy is legit and not a pothead. As of course, that is why Percy Harvin is available at 22 and not taken by, say, the 49ers at 10, if Michael Crabtree wasn't there, anyway. Or by the Oakland Raiders or something. Who knows? He might have gone there. But, yeah, Percy Harvin was found to be a legitimate guy who wants to compete, and boy, is this guy competitive indeed. Percy Harvin is looked at as pretty much the most competitive guy in this draft. And the Vikings need more and more players like that all the time. I mean, you could never have enough super-duper competitive players who, my God, this guy adds so many intangibles to the Minnesota Vikings at wide receiver. I mean, have you ever seen a guy who can catch the ball and literally just flat out make people miss one time after another, like a running back? And this guy is good at receiver and at running back, as he has played both positions for the University of Florida, which, of course, by the way, is not exactly South Carolina or something like where Troy Williamson came from, which is a team that, nobody's really heard of unless you're a big-time draft guy or something, or a big-time college football fan, which I'm going to be honest, I'm not a big-time college football fan. But Florida Gators, I mean, everybody knows who they are, obviously. They're a college powerhouse all the time, and I really like Florida Gators in football and in basketball. And, man, this guy is a national champion, and he plays through injuries. And as I said, he'll catch the ball and make people miss. He's got that explosive speed. And even more importantly than ever, this guy has hands of glue. I mean, this guy is not known to have problems dropping the football. He hangs onto the ball constantly. And, yeah, by the way, that's a problem with that Hayward Bay guy of the Oakland Raiders. Yeah, he sounds like Troy Williamson. But yeah, this is a really exciting pick for the Minnesota Vikings. I'm thrilled about it, and I'm sure many of you out there are as well. I mean, Percy Harvin has a chance to be a star in this league if he can lay off the bong, as of course he is already in the NFL substance program. The next infraction will be a 4-game suspension, and after that, well, yeah, it's gonna be interesting. As my friend Keith, who comes into where I work about daily, he says that all the time, that it's gonna be interesting. So that's a shout out to you, Keith, if you might be listening. By the way, that Michael Orr guy, of Ole Miss, slipped to Baltimore immediately, with a 23rd pick. Now that team is going to have a pretty good offensive line next year with acquiring Matt Burke and Michael Orr. Whew, that is going to be pretty good for the Baltimore Ravens. Watch out for them next year as an improving Joe Flacco, and a team that went all the way to the conference finals last year in the AFC. All the way to the conference finals, and was actually in that game until about midway through the fourth quarter, had a legitimate shot of winning it on the road in Pittsburgh. Yeah, Baltimore just might have won the Super Bowl this last year with the rookie quarterback. Crazy. Now they're going to have two really nice pieces to the puzzle on that offensive line. Watch out for the Baltimore Ravens out there. Could be a legitimate favorite, or not favorite, but a legitimate Super Bowl contender if Joe Flacco continues to develop. Green Bay Packers, by the way, another quick notable, acquiring Clay Matthews, 26th overall pick. Their draft on paper looks really good. Really good. Just like last year, Brian Brom did not turn out at all. In fact, he wasn't even the second string quarterback last year. So, I mean, on paper it looked phenomenal that they were able to get Brian Brom in the second round, but who knows what's going to happen with these guys. I kind of believe that they will work out, but who knows? We'll find out. Now, with a lot of us crying and complaining, some of us anyway, not a lot of us, but some of us crying and complaining that maybe we should have taken, Michael Orr, so we could have an offensive lineman, a right tackle that can really anchor this line for the next 10 to 15 years. Well, fortunately, Phil Lodeholt, a guy that the Vikings apparently had been coveting for quite a while, slipped to the second round for our Vikings. He was the 54th overall pick, number 22 in the second round. 54th overall, Phil Lodeholt, and he is a load, folks. He is a load at 6'8", 337 pounds. He is literally the same size as Bryant McKinney. Now, of course, size isn't everything. You have to have skill as well. And there's talk that he's a lot better protecting the run than the pass, and that's not always a good thing because he's just too slow. He is just too slow in a way. He's a little bit too big at times, but that's just the way it goes. That is just the way it goes. You're not going to get a perfect guy in the second round, but definitely has a shot to be a major improvement to this offensive line. And quite frankly, I'm pretty excited to have him. As it says, he allows defensive ends to dip under him on the pass rush. So that is the scary part about Phil Lodeholt, but that's about it. As long as he can improve a little bit in that area, he's got to be a nice improvement over Ryan Cook. Ryan Cook at best is a guy for depth, in my opinion. I don't think he is a starting player on the offensive line. All right, well, and real quick now, the final notable in this draft is I don't really know much about Jasper Brinkley, who went in the 5th round, and Jamarca Sanford, I know absolutely nothing about, a safety who was taken in the 7th round, but Jasper Brinkley was, of course, 5th round linebacker from South Carolina. Sanford from Mississippi, a safety. All right, but you never know. Who knows? Those guys could work out. You just don't know. Asher Allen. This guy's gonna be a good football player, I think. Vikings, of course, getting him the 22nd pick in the 3rd round, which, of course, 86th overall from Georgia. Well, not of course, but you get the idea. Some of you probably knew that already. This guy is one heck of a hitter, boy. This guy will just knock people around. And there are videos of Asher Allen putting a punishment on Percy Harvin more than once as they played each other, Georgia and Florida, over their careers. This guy, Asher Allen, has a good attitude. He was on the Paul Allen Show on KFAN, here locally, AM 1130 KFAN. This guy has a really, really good attitude. He's like, hey, you know what? I'm not really afraid of anybody. I'm going to go out there and punish people. This guy has a really good attitude, and boy, when you see his videos, he has a chance to be a really nice player in the NFL, and I think he's going to fit in pretty good. I mean, he's got it right mentally, and I think he's going to be a nice fit for this team. Of course, he is a cornerback, and definitely adds depth in that cornerback area. Now, of course, the Vikings did acquire Carl Pema from the Denver Broncos. They did also re-sign Benny Sapp, who competed for the nickelback position last year and lost out to Charles Gordon, number 41 for the Vikings, who is the nickelback at this point in time. But we'll see. Things are going to get very interesting as you now add Asher Allen to the mix. Marcus McCulley could be the odd man out. We're just going to have to see what happens. With that, it's always up to the Vikings how many cornerbacks or defensive backs they want to keep on this roster. There has been no addition, a major safety addition just through the draft here for the Minnesota Vikings. Of course, losing Darren Sharper, so that might add a little bit of flexibility in the defensive back position for this team. So we're just going to have to see how things go. The Vikings, of course, did not take Asher Allen in the third round to cut him. So it's going to be very interesting. There's also talk he could be a kick returner as well. So, hey, that's a pretty cool pick when you can get, more than one thing out of him. I like that pick a lot, Asher Allen. All right. Well, that concludes my draft talk for this point in time, as things hopefully will pan out nicely for these picks. Percy Harvin, of course, was going to head to Minneapolis for a rookie minicamp, and had to go to the hospital for dehydration when he was in Atlanta. Never made it here, had to go to the hospital. That's great. So he's just going to have to recover for now, and we'll just see him in minicamps in June, I guess. It's unfortunate we couldn't see him in purple right away. But as now I'm going to segue, as we just might be seeing a certain quarterback named Brett Favre wearing purple next year. There's a legitimate possibility, about a 40% chance Brett Favre will be wearing purple next year. And we're going to be talking about that right after this. Here on thesportstuff.com, we're toughing up on Brave the Wild with Paladino. Join me, Paladino, as we brave the Minnesota Wild Hockey Club on our way to the playoffs. We're available on thesportstuff.com and iTunes. The boogeyman, Derek Bugard, says you'd better listen or he just might drop the gloves. Call up your courage and brave the wild with your buddy, Paladino Joey. And we are back here on Purple Mafia, episode number 30. A reminder for iPod users, and also would like you to check out Brave the Wild. That is my Minnesota Wild Hockey podcast. Do check it out. That also has the exact same situation as the Minnesota Timberwolves do. They need a new GM and coach, as Doug Risebrough fired, Jacques Lemaire resigned, and of course it's a season wrap-up, and I will be having a guest. This show, Brave the Wild, should be out tomorrow at some point in the evening, as I will have Nate Dogg join me for that one, as I will be a guest for that show as well. And hope to have Dylan Richardson or somebody on board for Purple Mafia at some point in time. All right, well, let's get into it. Brett Favre in Vikings Purple, Judd Zulgad and Chip Scoggins, Star Tribune staff writers, contributing to this story. A chat with Childress might determine if ex-Packer will play for Vikings. Of course, this in the Star Tribune. This is just amazing. Of course, this story reported late Tuesday afternoon that was crediting a source with direct knowledge of the discussion between the parties that, there will be a talk between Brad Childress and Brett Favre about possibly playing for the Vikings. That is just crazy. And this is going to be really exciting, as now, of course, Brett Favre, as I mentioned, available, flat out available this time. There is no poison pill. So, there is no deal where the only way the Vikings could get him is if the New York Jets were to trade him here. But the Packers put a poison pill in their trade, saying that if they traded Brett Favre to the Vikings, they'd have to give up 3 first-round picks. Wouldn't that have been crazy? So, yeah, not the case this time. Unfortunately, Brett Favre is a year older and a year more damaged. And, of course, everybody just now all over Yahoo and ESPN pretty much calling him a diva as you look at that report. It's interesting. This will be very interesting. Now we get to this article real quick. The ESPN report stated that there is a mutual understanding that sometime soon after the meeting, Favre will decide whether to sign with the Vikings, and that Childress would expect him to participate fully in the off-season mini-camps and training camps. Favre, who will turn 40 on October 10th, was never fond of participating in the Packers' off-season camps. The future Hall of Famer did not get traded to the New York Jets in time last year for that to become an issue. Yeah, that figures. That's the unfortunate part. A lot of these older school guys, they just like to skip out on camps, like Michael Strahan and all of them, because they've been around long enough. I feel the same way about lawn cleanups, man. I've been doing those long enough. This is my 16th season. I wish I could skip out on lawn cleanups and just do the mowing part too, but it's not that simple for me. These guys seem to get away with murder, boy. They already get paid 1 trillion times more than us, but I guess that's just how it goes. Unfortunately, we're used to it, us fans. We're conditioned to divas in the NFL and in the NBA especially, and every other sport. NBA is a game I love, but of course it's filled with divas. We all know that. Back to the article. One thing working in the Vikings' favor is that Favre is very familiar with the West Coast offensive system the team runs. He directed the same offense for several years in Green Bay. He also was extremely close with former Packers assistant and current Vikings offensive coordinator Darrell Bevell. So, of course, that is a big thing right there. Major thing, as he did not have the West Coast offense with the New York Jets last year, and he still played pretty good football for a while. Started out the year excellent, and it was kind of a downtrend by about the mid-season point. Unfortunately, Favre, who threw 22 touchdown passes last year, also threw 22 interceptions with about 3,700 passing yards. Of course, I'm not reading the article. That is just the stats that I know Brett Favre had last year, and that show. The interceptions to me are a concern. And, of course, the injury issue, which, as we get back to the article here, had something to do with that. Perhaps, now as I'm back in the article, perhaps the Vikings' biggest concern will be the condition of Brett Favre's injured right biceps tendon, which played a role in his struggles late last season when the Jets won only one of their final 5 games. ESPN reported that Favre might believe his arm can heal on its own without surgery, and how the injury heals will be a factor in his decision. Of course, that is a major, major thing with this. You don't want to get Brett Favre on the Minnesota Vikings if he's going to be a shell of himself. If he's going to, as they say, his velocity on his throws later in the year was not what it used to be. And that, of course, can lead to more and more interceptions because it's like throwing out a duck for someone to catch. That's just the way it is. Just a couple mile-per-hour difference is a big difference when you're playing in the NFL, as people are that good. Cornerbacks like, say, a young Darren Sharper or maybe Asher Allen someday are like that. They're gonna catch up to passes like that if there isn't enough velocity. We saw what happened with Brad Johnson when he had that neck and nerve injury for a while here in Minnesota. That was a bummer. Mike Morris, who is also of KFAN fame and a former Minnesota Vikings long snapper, mentioned that, yes, a bicep tendon is something that can heal without injury. So that is encouraging, but the discouraging part about the whole deal, Brett Favre is almost 40 years old, and when you're almost 40 years old, it's a little harder to heal than when you're 25, 24, 23, or younger. That's also a concern, especially all the mileage on that arm and shoulder. I can't even imagine the mileage on a guy that hasn't missed a game in his career. So, at least at the point when he became a starter. You can't, when you're not going to be able to play in the game, well, yeah, that, when he was a backup with the Atlanta Falcons, what do you do? But, of course, he was healthy then, too. But this is getting very interesting, folks. Very, very interesting. I'm looking forward to it. To me, there's no reason why the Vikings shouldn't do it other than if he is the biggest cancer in the history of the world, and I can't believe he's going to be. He was out of place with the New York Jets. It was a totally different conference, totally different offense, and he didn't really have any association with anybody on that team prior. As I try not to sneeze there, excuse me. I apologize for that. My voice is a little cracky now. But, yeah, he had no prior association with the New York Jets at all, or their offense. And he was unhappy there because of that. In Minnesota, which is, of course, his opportunity to go against the Green Bay Packers and be on the team he wanted to be on last year anyway. We all know that. We all knew that when he was totally set free, that he would at least explore the idea of coming to the Minnesota Vikings, an opportunity to play against his now arch rival Green Bay Packers, which is kind of funny. We know what happened with Michael Jordan when he was pretty much forced to retire by the Chicago Bulls too early. He got upset, and he wanted to join the New York Knicks at one point in time. Eventually, just gave in and retired, and of course, came back with the Washington Wizards. And because it was his way of saying, "I'll retire when I say I retire. I'm not going to retire because the Bulls told me to." So Favre, of course, doing the same thing with the Green Bay Packers, and now would like to try to stick it to him somehow, some way. But yeah, as I was saying, there's no reason not to do this. To me, you know what? Tavares Jackson and the development of Tavares Jackson and hampering the development of him. He's going into his 4th year, and I don't care about Tavares Jackson. I'm saying it right now here in the air. I do not care about Tavares Jackson. I don't care. You know why? Because this guy, just the thought of him starting in a playoff game made me cringe last year. I had no faith the Minnesota Vikings were going to defeat the Philadelphia Eagles if we played in the Metrodome or in Philadelphia. I had no confidence in the Vikings with Tavares Jackson as the starting quarterback. Now, I'm really sorry I'm really sorry that I'm not being a homer and defending Tavares Jackson or thinking the Vikings were going to kick the Eagles' butts. There was no reason for me to believe that, folks. There was no reason at all. Tavares Jackson got his butt kicked by the Atlanta Falcons, who to me were not as good as the Philadelphia Eagles in the Metrodome. Yes. So, that was a rookie quarterback that came in here, not a war-scarred veteran who's been to the Super Bowl and been to multiple conference championship games, including last season, in Donovan McNabb. So, who I like, by the way. Unlike some other people out there. But, yeah, I like Donovan McNabb a lot. But that's a side note. No, I don't care about Tavares Jackson. I have no faith in him. He is a nice spark off the bench if somebody is hurt or maybe having a horrible game. Sure, he's a spark plug off the bench on occasion. Now, I know that sounds like a basketball line, but, that's what he was. He was a spark plug when Gus Frerotte was playing horrible and eventually got injured in Detroit. We probably wouldn't have won that game if that didn't happen. But that lasted for about 2 games, folks. He got hot in Arizona because the Arizona Cardinals weren't trying or something. They went in some kind of nosedive temporarily for some mysterious reason, which I'm still to this day not sure what the hell happened to them for about that 4-game span there when they had already won the division and just were kind of being lazy. But no, Tavares Jackson, no, I don't care. Sage Rosenfels is used to being a backup. And what's 1 more year or maybe 2 more years for Sage Rosenfels? And if Brett Favre stinks or is injured or something, Sage Rosenfels, there you go, Sage Rosenfels. He could go out and have his opportunity to prove himself as a starting quarterback. He will have an opportunity to prove it. No guarantee that he will prove it. Just an opportunity, as I mentioned 1,000 times there. But yeah, I say go for it. There's no reason not to at this point in time. He's not Barry Bonds. He's not going to just kick everybody out of his way and say, the hell with you. I'm Mr. Superstar, even though I'm 40 years old. And, but no, he's not Barry Bonds. He's not Mark McGwire, who wasn't as big of a cancer, but still, I can't imagine Mark McGwire was really the nicest teammate either. But, no, this guy wants to be here. He didn't even want to be in New York. He does want to be here, and he wants an opportunity. If he's able to play again, I think he will be very happy to be a member of the Vikings, and that this could be a really fun year or two with him as a starting quarterback. And when you got aging guys like Antoine Winfield, Pat Williams, guys like that on your defense, you had Matt Burke, now I can't talk about him anymore, but veterans like that who are still very good, very, very good, especially Antoine Winfield, who is still in his prime, by the way. You got to take advantage of that time, that short window of hope. Obviously you have Jared Allen, who's just getting into his prime. Adrian Peterson, just getting into his prime. Let's take advantage of it and have some fun. And don't forget, you also have Bernard Berrien, who is also getting into his prime, or is in his prime, hopefully. And you got the young, super-duper athletic, and potential to the roof of that Metrodome, Percy Harvin. This could be a really fun season. If Brett Favre is able to come in here and play some consistent football for the Vikings, this could be a really fun year. And, hey, I'm all for it, folks. I am along for the ride if this Minnesota Vikings team does acquire Brett Favre for a 1 or 2 year deal. And I don't blame a soul who is. I don't really blame somebody who isn't, because, he is older. But at the same time, I'm going to ask you why. Why would you say no, really, in all honesty, other than bitterness? You're just bitter and jaded that he was on the Green Bay Packers for all those years. And to me, that is not enough a reason to say no. That is not enough of a reason to say no when this guy has motivation to kick your former rival's ass. Why not take advantage of it? Let's do it and hope for the best. As you do have a safety net in Sage Rosenfels if something happens. He's not Joe Montana in his prime, but Sage Rosenfels will at least be the guy you were going to have anyway. I mean, he's the guy you were going to have as your quarterback anyway, right? So, whatever. I'm not going to cry a river for any other Minnesota Viking quarterback if Brett Favre is able to come in here. Let's give it a shot, folks. Let's give it a shot. All right. Well, I hope episode number 30 was worth the wait for you out there. To me, I really enjoyed it, as I always do, and I'm just happy to finally be back and to have a life again outside of work. And this is work as well, but this is fun work. This is the kind of work I love, and I hope to be my full-time job someday, but it isn't yet. Man, is it going to be good when it is, though. Notice I said when, not if. But thanks always to all of you out there for listening. This show couldn't be as big as it is without you, and I want you out there to help this show continue to grow by telling a friend, telling a family member, telling other Viking fans out there about Purple Mafia to download and listen to it on thesportstuff.com and iTunes. It is, of course, more than worth it. Thanks all of you out there again. And thank you again, executive producer Dylan Richardson. NFL East to West, folks, do check that out on thesportstuff.com and iTunes. Really cool show. It's just really cool. Awesome. Dylan, great job. And we will talk to you out there soon. Take care.